Shall we start?
Sure, Deepa, can get started.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Deepa Rao, and I'm the current president of Northeast Ohio Women in Tech, that's NEOWIT. So our mission is to strive to provide education, resources, and networking opportunities for women and minorities throughout Northeast Ohio tech community. So our vision for Northeast Ohio Women in Tech is to inspire women and minorities to excel and discover opportunities in the tech industry through the creation of a connected, supported community of shared resources. So we are in quarter 1, and we just had our career advancement series. We had our resume building workshop. Today we are having creating social media profiles. And the next month we are having how to build your personal brand. So quarter 2, we are highlighting technology trends. We will be having presentations on AWS cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and robotics. In quarter 3, we are planning on having industrial trends, that's data analytics, hybrid work culture, adaptation, and supply chain digitalization. In quarter 4, we have change management, agile, and DevOps. So Zoom links and in-person meeting information will be posted on all NEOWIT social media platforms. I want to introduce our board members. Swati Venkatraman is a vice president. Chitkala Akela is our treasurer. Shravanti Velamapati is our co-treasurer. And we have 2 board members, Suma Lokesh and Pavana Lalit. Welcome, Suma and Pavana. Now over to you, Swati.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you, everyone. I know that though our initial target audience was Northeast Ohio women and minorities, we have people from all over the country on the call. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Varun, for spending this evening with us. So Varun works in strategy and operations at LinkedIn, where he drives internal product and business strategy. Prior to working at LinkedIn, Varun worked in technology and business consulting for EY, Ernst & Young, and a startup consulting firm called Spalding Rich. Varun currently lives in Chicago and is a proud graduate of the Ohio State University. Thanks, Varun, for joining us. And a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If you're not actively talking, please be on mute. And we want to make this workshop as engaging as possible. So if you have a question, please raise your hand or put your question in chat, and we will get to your question ASAP. So without further ado, over to you, Varun. The floor is yours.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you everyone for having me today. So for today's session, I'm going to talk about how to master the job search in 2024. So essentially, I'm going to talk through, again, touch up on how to optimize your resume, how to set up, how to optimize your LinkedIn profile, and then how to tackle the interview process, and then finally, how to use AI to supercharge your job search. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh, looks like I can't share my screen. I think it says the host disabled participant screen sharing. I don't know if we could change that.
Deepa, is that a setting that you would need to change?
Oh, okay.
Deepa has made Varun the host now. So yes, yeah, Varun, you're good to go.
Thank you. Give me one sec. Cool. Hopefully everyone can see the slide deck. It says mastering the job search. Great. Cool. So let me go ahead and get started then. So, and I'm having... Cool. Hopefully my slide updated. Did it just update for everyone?
No, still at the first page.
It says mastering the job search process in 2024. Is that the intended slide, Varun?
Oh, I'm back. I think my Zoom just quit, but can you guys all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Give me one sec again. Okay, can you see an agenda slide?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Cool. So what I'm going to walk through is creating an impactful resume, leveraging LinkedIn as a job seeker, job interview strategies, and then how to use AI. So from there, let me move on to the next slide. Cool. So as you can see, the one thing to keep in mind is the shorter, more concise your resume, the better it is. So employers can review dozens or hundreds of resumes for positions and usually prefer shorter ones that succinctly summarize a candidate's qualifications. So one thing to keep in mind is that the average time you have to capture the reader's attention is about 6 seconds. So not a lot of time, and it's all the more important for you to have an impactful resume that kind of captures everything that you've accomplished in your job. So a resume should typically be about 1 page in length, or there are certain circumstances under which a 2 page resume is acceptable. So if you have more experience, like if you're further along in your career, have 10 plus years of experience maybe that needs to be captured, or if you work in a very specific industry like government, academia, or science, that's when you want to have that longer resume. If you go the 2 page route, make sure all the experiences listed are relevant and impactful for the role that you're applying for. And again, remember that the main page that most recruiters are going to pay attention to is the first one. Cool. So moving to the next slide. This one is about organizing your resume. So a resume usually contains an objective and or career summary statement at the very top, chronological listing of all your accomplishments, and then any additional certifications and special skills. Again, this can vary depending on your circumstance. There are certain times where it may make sense to have a career summary statement, especially if there's a specific narrative that you want to push about the experience you have, or if there's very specific experience that's better highlighted in a paragraph instead of as bullet points. That's when you would have something like this, but it's not strict, right? It kind of depends on your circumstance and how you want to best convey your information. At the end of the day, you want to highlight the specific skills that are going to be the best match for the job that you're looking for. Cool. So looking over the general overview, again, you'd start with the optional objective or professional summary. This is if you want to have a narrative that highlights specific achievements. You'd then have your chronological listing of experience, so everything you've done within the last 10 to 15 years. If you have a longer career than that, it may be helpful to just cap it off at 15 years, unless there's something that's very specific or impactful that's worth calling out. In terms of skills, it's important to highlight your relevant competencies, hard skills, soft skills, etc. So next, I'm going to talk about the structure for bullet points for writing your resume. So again, the thing you want to keep in mind is you want to tailor your resume to make sure that you have the most relevant and impactful experiences. The other piece is being sure to review the job description. So you want to include achievements that the prospective employer would find interesting. So this means going through the actual job description, seeing if there's specific things that are being highlighted that they may be looking for in a candidate. And if it fits with your job role, it's highlighting those specific keywords, key skills, that sort of thing. And then lastly, it's to quantify your success with numbers as much as possible. It's always helpful to speak to the impact that you've done at your job. And making sure you clearly communicate that, like the number of people you may have led, the percentage of time you may have saved by doing something, or the amount of percentage of money that you may have made or saved for the company are important things to highlight. So one thing that I normally like to talk about is having a specific framework or structure to organizing your resume. So you want to make sure that your resume follows the PAR method. So you're essentially describing the project or problem. You're describing the activity that you specifically did, and then you're describing the actual results, outcomes, or benefits. So essentially, the way that
1 page. What a dumbass.
Oh, excuse me. Can you repeat that?
If you are not actively talking, can you please go, not actively participating, can you please go on mute? I think we are good to proceed.
Cool. Sounds good. So yeah, going back to the way this is set up, you essentially want to start each bullet point and, oh, can everyone see my slide deck? Just making sure I'm still on the right screen.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So looking at the slide deck, as an example, you would start with like the action verb, so specific skills or industry specific competencies that you used. You add the relevant task. You'd add the actual outcome or accomplishment that came out of that task. And then that's how you can string your sentence together. The actual order in which you add these doesn't matter too much. So you can start with the result sometimes and then talk about how the activity and the project helped you get to that result. You can start with the actual activity itself. So it doesn't always have to be PAR. It can be ARP or RAP, right? Like it can kind of vary with the way that this goes. So yeah, you can essentially, I'll give you a few examples of how this works. So a bad bullet point, right, would be I created documentation for new software updates. Like a better way to do this would be I improved software documentation to drive quicker bug resolution time, resulting in 300 man hours being saved annually via increased workplace efficiency, right? So the difference here is that you have a clear activity over here. You improved the software documentation. You have the problem that was being solved or the project, which is to drive quicker bug resolution time. And then finally, you have the actual result, which is it resulted in 300 hours being saved annually due to increased efficiency, right? So this way, it's a much more cohesive way to communicate the actual impact you're driving. And yeah, it's better to communicate the actual impacts that you have. Another example, right, is if it's a customer service job, it's bad would be provided excellent customer service and help customers find items. But improving that would be you assisted an average of 40 customers per day in finding or selecting items, provided recommendations that generated 8K in additional revenue. So you have clear numbers about the volume of customers you helped with each day. It adds some scale for what you're accomplishing. You have clear impact of the actual revenue amounts, and you can clearly convey, again, the impact that you drove at this company.
Varun, there are some questions in chat. Can we take them, or is
Sure.
this the right time to take them?
Yeah, would it be better if I waited till the end? I thought we had 10
Sure,
minutes.
yeah, absolutely. We can do that.
Cool, sounds good. Yeah, so I'll get to all questions at the end, but feel free to keep adding them to the chat though, and that way we can keep track of them for sure.
Perfect.
Cool, thank you. Cool. Next, we can go to how you tailor your resume to job descriptions by highlighting desired skills. So now we're going to get into a little bit of how to set yourself apart as a candidate when you're trying to apply for jobs en masse. So when an employer posts a job opening, they usually include a list of responsibilities and required or preferred qualifications. There's very specific keywords that are in these job descriptions, and these are what they use to essentially find potential applicants. It's when those keywords match. So a great way to make your resume stand out is by actually tailoring the experience that you have and making it match the exact qualifications that job posters are seeking in a potential candidate. So you want to review the job description, write down or highlight any significant keywords related to the skills. So there may be specific phrases or words that may be repeating throughout the job description. You want to then compare to your resume. So you want to think about which skills you're highlighting and where gaps may lie versus the job description. Like, for example, just using a very specific example, right? Like if you are applying for a product management job and the product management description is very heavy on, let's say, user interface, right? It's the product management job is very big on how UX needs to be used and how design qualifications are important, but your entire resume is focusing on the software efficiencies that maybe that you helped drive. That's not exactly a one-to-one fit. And although you may be qualified and there may be like transferable skills, it's a lot harder for the recruiter to make that leap, right? So you want to make it as easy as possible for the recruiter to immediately see how your job skills may apply. So maybe what helps is thinking about repurposing. Maybe there were software efficiencies that you ultimately led, but maybe you took a design lens to them, right? Maybe you like thought about how the workflow could be improved, how the actual person's interacting with tools, right? There's many different ways you can kind of reframe your work to better make a stronger case for yourself. So there's less of the recruiter having to think about like, oh, is this guy going to be a good fit? Is this woman going to be a bad fit? Right? It's a lot easier for you to make that case for yourself. So you want to make sure you're repurposing it using specific skills and keywords that show up. The other added benefit is if you're applying for a position, there's this thing called ATS, applicant tracking software. It basically just goes through all the different resumes and it'll find like, oh, this resume has like an 80% keyword match, right? And it's going to put it at the top of the recruiter's list. So that's the other bonus, is that you can literally get through the system better, but it also means that when someone's actually reading it, it's easier for them to see how you would fit into the role that they're trying to fill. So that's the piece on that. So I was going to show two quick resume examples just to quickly show you what a good resume looks like. And then we can go into the LinkedIn portion of the session. So give me 1 second while I pull that up. Sorry, give me 1 sec. So I'm going to start with this resume over here. So this is an example of a one-page resume. So I'm going to then show a 2-page resume just to show you the differences. But really quickly here, you can kind of see some of the principles that I talked about. First, for one, this is my resume actually, but so this is kind of tailored to my experience. I only have 5 years of working experience, so I didn't see the need for me to have a summary statement at the very top of my page. I felt that the best way to advocate for myself in my resume was to actually highlight the specific projects and the diverse skills that I used for them. And one example that I want to call out is like that PAR framework that I mentioned. So in the second bullet point over here, you can see implemented an Anaplan solutions, that's the specific software, implemented XYZ software that increased quarterly forecasting accuracy, introduced detailed scenario planning, and gross margin target setting capabilities, and reduced process time by 30%. So same idea where I quantify the actual impact over here. I talk about the specific action that I took, and then I talk about the specific problem that I'm solving. That's generally the type of format that you want. And again, you want to make sure any key certifications and education are highlighted. Usually bottom of the resume is good, unless there's something very specific to your education that would give you a leg up in your job. So that's one example. Here's another one, a 2-page resume. Just pull this over here. So here we have a 2-page resume. So this is someone who's got a more experienced, who's got a longer experience. So they have the key things at the very top that they think will set them apart, right? So transformational, change management, organizational design leader. There's very general bullet points, which is basically about setting that narrative, right? Here are the key track record of different, specific skills that were used, specific industry experiences, and then key strengths, right? There's also areas of expertise. And then the person goes into the specific experiences that they have, their education, civic engagement, et cetera. So again, it really depends on your situation about whether to go for a 1-page resume or a 2-page resume. But ultimately, the way to think about it, when to make that leap, is if you think that there's anything specific that the actual job description, the PAR, right, bullet point doesn't fully convey that you think would be helpful to convey, that's when it would make sense to add these additional things to extend your resume to 2 pages, where you can kind of highlight specific skills, specific track record, anything along those lines that you think would help set you apart. Cool. With that, I'm now going to go on to using LinkedIn. So the key things, I'm gonna flip over. I'm gonna pull up my LinkedIn in just a second here. But the key things that I want to touch on is first talking about how your profile should be fully filled out and what that means. Making sure that you have a high quality background and profile photo. And then I'll go into how to find jobs on the platform, how to use filters, how to find recruiters for specific jobs, how to reach out to those recruiters, and then how to make sure that you have the right connections at target companies when you need them. And then lastly, how to create more thought leadership using the platform. So let me pull up the platform very quickly. 1 sec. Computer's a little slow, so bear with me for just a second. I'm pulling it up on the side here. Cool. So here's my profile. I'm gonna pull that up. Cool. So the first thing to know when you're updating your profile is to make sure you have a current, up-to-date, high-quality photo. If you don't have a photo, or if you have a very outdated photo, it actually works against you. One of the things that a lot of studies show is that when recruiters look at profiles, they tend to actually judge the candidate based on the profile picture. So you want something professional, you want something clean, you want something high quality. If it's very blurry, right, there's this subconscious thing that happens where the recruiter doesn't, view you as highly, or may not trust the completeness of your profile. So it's very important that you fill out the details, like having a picture. You have a background of some sort, right? It can either be related to your profession, or in my case, I just put the city of Chicago. You then want to have a clear statement that kind of says what your current title is. So for me, it's product owner, strategy and operations at LinkedIn, right? From there, you want to then go ahead and make sure it's as complete as possible. One of the things you'll want to do is to add an actual bio. So you want to add a bio over here. And there's a few options you'll see when you get in that give you specific tips to show how you can signal to recruiters that you're open to work and the specific steps to take. I personally have not added a bio at the moment because a bio usually is something that you want to add when you have a clear perspective on what your current role is and you have a clear perspective of what your next role should be, right? It depends on your goals. If you're using it primarily for job seeking, then that's a good way to use the bio. If you're using it primarily to network, you can frame your bio that way. But right now, the phase that I'm in is I'm still exploring what my next career step is going to be. So I didn't want to add a bio that's a little too generic or too open-ended. Once I get a better sense of direction, I'm going to add a bio in there, but it's helpful to add one that clearly conveys the value that you can bring. So let me actually show you an example bio, just so you can see what it's like. It's not mine, but it's a profile that I thought looked pretty good. Let me pull that in here. Oops. Cool. So you can see that this person has filled out their bio, and essentially what they're saying is they're first talking about their work experience, 9 years work experience in business strategy and operations. It talks about their current position. It talks about what they do. They say how they have a strong background in project management, strategy, and partnerships, and they talk about a specific role that they had. So already in the first paragraph, if a recruiter is looking at this, they immediately have a sense that, okay, this person has 9 years of work experience. They're a manager, so they have people management experience. They also have program management experience because they have the chief of staff and these additional keywords in here. And they also get a sense of where they play, right? What's their industry? It talks about software as a service, SaaS, talks about sales operations, talks about go-to-market initiatives. And then they talk about the specific skills, right? My core competencies are driving growth, optimizing performance, enabling collaboration, et cetera, et cetera. They talk about what they're passionate about, and they talk about what their overall goal is, right? So the reason this is a great bio is because it hits so many different bases. It talks about like their background, talks about their interests, it talks about like who they are and what they've done. Again, for me, I'm still figuring out what that is and how I want to frame my next experience. So I don't have that filled out, but this is a good way to fill out your profile. So I'll talk about the rest of the profile now. From there, you want to make sure it's as complete as possible. So you want to add, so the one advantage here is unlike a resume, you don't have to kind of tailor your experiences to the top things over here. You want to make sure that you have basically as much exhaustive experience as you can add. So in my case, I've added not only the places that I've worked, I've added LinkedIn, I've added EY, right? The other consulting firm. I've also added internships and things like that. Because one of the benefits of LinkedIn is when you connect with someone, it shows if both of you worked at the same company prior, and it's a great way to like network with new people, especially if they move on to new roles. The other big piece is you want to make sure that each of the job descriptions are filled out, right? I'm not currently seeking a job, so I haven't updated the most recent one, but you want to make sure that there is something for each of the jobs on here. It's really helpful because if a recruiter is trying to fill a position and they look up your name, they're going to look up your name plus specific skills, right? Because if you were to put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter, the best way to find candidates, if they're just openly seeking candidates, right? Not if you've applied for the job, if they're just seeking candidates for a role, the best way for them to find those people is by searching specific skills. They'll look up like, give me someone who's an expert in product management. Give me someone who's an expert in UX design. Give me someone, they're not searching by name, they're searching by skill. So it's very important that you have the skill on your page so that you show up higher in the search rankings, if that skill is on there. So I have a lot of keywords right here, but more importantly, I have those skills like I mentioned. In LinkedIn, you have the option to add skills to each job description. Essentially, as you add each experience, I'm just going to edit this real quick to show you, right? Here's my position at EY. I'm just going to go ahead and click edit. In here, you have the ability to edit your title, your employment type, all that good stuff, right? The simple stuff, which is when you started, when you ended. But the key part is this skills section over here. So skills is where you have the ability to add everything that's going to show up in a search result. So I have like strategy, business process improvement, problem solving, requirements gathering, so on and so forth, technical documentation, business transformation, etc. So you have the ability to add these skills and it'll help you show up in a job search. In terms of how to actually fill out each of these different positions, you have two options. You can either reiterate what's on your resume if you want that to be broadcasted broadly, or the other thing that you could do is you could basically rewrite some of this, right? Your resume could be a true objective description of what you did. Whereas if you wanted to convey some other things like, in this role, I learned to do X, Y, Z. In this role, I ended up doing, whatever it is. It gives you a chance to add a bit more narrative on here. So that's where you have the ability to add these things to your resume, or sorry, to your LinkedIn profile. And you can either go the resume route or you can go the route where you want to differentiate yourself in a certain way. So again, yep, completeness. And then from there, once you're done editing your skills, let me just get out of this view for a second. Yeah, again, skills, super important. Make sure volunteering is on there, any licenses, certification, education, so on and so forth. So that's your profile. You want to make sure it's as complete as possible. Next, let's talk about how to actually find a job in an effective way that you're interested in. So there's the job search functionality, right, which most people are probably familiar with. I'm just going to go to jobs over here. In here, you can search for a job, right? I'm just going to stick with that product management example real quick. So I'll look up product manager, right? And then once you do this, you then have the ability to filter further. So as you can see, I've searched product manager. There's a million different jobs. I can go to all filters over here. And then I can now think, okay, I want, right, most relevant or most recent. Let's go most relevant. Date posted, I'll put past month, because chances are if it's more than the past month, it may be filled. It may not be open. Experience level, I'll just add mid-senior, right? You can then go ahead and filter by company if you'd like as well. So if you're very specifically targeting company, let's say I'm just interested in Google, I'll go ahead and do that. I can pick the job type, right? Full-time, part-time. I'm going to go full-time. You can do on-site hybrid, but I'll just stick with this for now. So by doing this, I now have a very targeted search here, right? I can clearly see the specific jobs that met my criteria, which in my case, I just looked up product manager, mid-senior. Yeah. Once you do this, you can see the job description, obviously. This is where you can tailor your resume to meet this job description. And then more importantly, you can go down here and you can kind of see some of the skills that are on here. And it'll tell you things like, okay, these are the skills that are on my profile. So like I mentioned before, presentations, analytics, competitive analysis. These are things that I have on my profile because those are skills that I've developed over the years. So I add that on here. It'll tell you which ones are missing. And that's a way for you to think about what you may need to be a good fit for the job, right? So that's the thing here. Now, going back to the job, let's say you do your searching, right? You sift through everything. You then find the specific job that you want. Let's say, I go to this one very quickly. As you can see for this one over here, there's over 100 applicants. So obviously that's a lot of competition. So one way to differentiate yourself is instead of just hitting apply and kind of leaving it at that, is you want to take it a step further and actually find a recruiter that is going to be helping with this position. So one way to do this is by searching, you just look up recruiter. That's the position I'm going to search for. So I'll start there. So I'm going to search recruiter very quickly. Oh, I'm in the jobs space, right? So let me go back to the homepage. I'm going to look up recruiter. And this is an overall search. So, right, so it could be like job posts, it could be people, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and filter further and say, I want people who have recruiter in the title, right? And then from here, I'm then going to go ahead and filter further and say current company. And because I'm targeting Google, I'm going to click Google. And I now have all the recruiters at Google over here, right? So if I were to go ahead and do this, I'm then going to go ahead and add product. And here we go. So I see this person over here, Trevor Watley, right? He's got recruiter at Google, right? Some of the things, skills that he's got here, product development, product management. So this tells me that, okay, this person, maybe he recruits for product managers. I also see this person. This is actually even more direct. It says product management recruiter. Great. I now have a contact, right? So you now have the ability to find, she's not going to be the only product management recruiter. There's going to be a lot more. So you got to spend a little bit of time sifting through this, but you then go ahead and find what the actual recruiter is, right? And then you can craft them a message. In fact, I'll show you an example of a message I've used in the past, and it's the message that got me my job at LinkedIn today. Essentially what I did is it's this right here, and I'm going to zoom in. Give me one sec. So after doing all that work, oops, I'm just going to click back. Took me to the initial slide. After doing all that work of finding the recruiter and understanding like what position it is that they're trying to fill, we can send something like this, where I basically go ahead and say, I start by adding a subject, which is the specific position. I say, hey, here's my name. I'm currently doing this. I just applied to this position, XYZ position, and I believe my background in XYZ is going to be a good fit for the role. I'd love to connect with you and learn more about what you look for in candidates. And if you have any availability, let me know, right? I'd love to find out any more information. And then the person was like, oh, like, I love your background and I love that you specialize in XYZ. We're looking for that. We're looking for that for our role. Let's jump on a call and go from there. And after we jumped on that call, that's what led me to keep going through my interview process and end up getting the job that I have today. So I think one way to really differentiate yourself is to go this route, which is to identify specific recruiters and then reach out to them, right? And there could be like 100, it could be like 50, right? It takes a little bit of effort to kind of send these messages out, but I think it pays off because I sent this same message to maybe 60 or 70 people. And at the end of the day, only like maybe 5 people responded. So it may seem a little discouraging. You may not always get a response, but one of the 5 people who responded happened to be someone who was staffing the exact position that I was seeking. So it was a great way for me to get connected and kind of take a shortcut and bypass the line of all the other applicants, right, who have just submitted their resume and called it a day. So that's another way that you could use LinkedIn to do that. Cool. So with that, next, let's talk about interview prep. So let's say you've done all that, you've updated your resume, you've used LinkedIn, you found the position, now you're in the interview. So one of the things to do is to just look up common behavioral questions, right? And I have a link here, I'll share this out with everyone, but there's very common questions like, tell me about yourself, why do you want to work here, what are your greatest strengths, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that are common, and it'll be easy for you to build up a good test bank, essentially, of different answers that you want to use. You can also look up questions specific to your target company in Glassdoor. Usually, if you use that as a website, you'll see people like talking about specific interview questions that they had. And then you want to prepare your stories and answers by using the STAR method. So this is where you start with a situation. You describe the challenge or problem that you faced. You talk about the task, the role in that situation. You talk about the action, so the actual steps you took to overcome that challenge. And then finally, the result, what actually happened, right? It's very similar to the resume format, but it's the same thing again, where you want to make it very clear and easy to follow, right? So many times it's easy in an interview to just ramble about what you did and what it accomplished. And it's very hard for the person on the other end to fully comprehend and grasp the important parts, what actually matters, that sells you as a good candidate. So you're essentially making it easy for them by taking a very simple approach with, here's what happened, here's what I had to do, here's what it led to, right? Here's what I learned, or here's the actual impact, whatever it may be that's helpful to call out. The other thing with interview prep is to practice, practice, practice. The more practice you get, the better you become at it. So think through like what type of problems the company is trying to solve, think through what type of questions they're going to ask, and think about how you can match your questions and answers to align with their needs. It's a great practice to just go through your resume and put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter. You can think, okay, if a recruiter who doesn't know me were to see my resume today, what would they be most curious about? Because if they're trying to fill XYZ job and I have ABC experience, what are they going to ask to ensure that I'm a good fit, right? So write down these questions and basically draw from your experiences. You can be like, I have an example of how I turned around like a failing project. Maybe you have an example of how you really went above and beyond and accomplished something great. Maybe there's someone who was difficult to work with and you managed to figure out a solution to agree with them, whatever it may be. Think about the type of things they're going to ask you and have those questions and answers ready. Because if you can draw from your own experience to do that, that helps set yourself apart. The last thing you want to do is you want to videotape yourself answering interview questions. So you may notice like areas where you're stumbling, maybe areas that you're not as clear or confident in your answer, and you can basically judge where your gaps may be as you try to improve it. So here's an example, right? So an interview example is describe a time where you're under a lot of pressure at work. How did you react? So it can start by in my previous job, right, as an account executive. So my coworkers like quit immediately. Although I was managing a full load of accounts, I was assigned this new client, right? I took some measures to de-stress, then I evaluated and restructured my task list, so on and so forth. The final result is the client was so impressed with what I did, they immediately signed an annual contract that netted our company $5 million. But again, it's very easy to follow what the problem was, where you stepped in, what specifically you did, and what was the end result of that. So that's a good way to make your answers. One thing to remember too is at the end, you have the ability to ask questions to the interviewer, right? And it's actually very important to make sure you get right questions in there. Because as much as they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them in a way. You want to find out what it's like to work at this place. You want to find out like what they need, right? So one of the ways to do this is a question to ask is fast forward 1 year. You're looking back on this hire. what did this specific hire do to exceed every one of your expectations, right? And why it's effective is it shows the interviewer you're results focused. It also shows that you want to know what success looks like so you can make it happen. And lastly, they'll picture you in that role. When they think about like, oh, what does a great candidate look like? There's someone who does X, Y, Z, right? So it's a good way to kind of do that. You can also ask some questions like, what are some goals has the manager set, for you over the next 6 months? How can I, as a hire, help you achieve them? This again kind of helps reinforce that you understand your role in this, right? Like your manager has certain goals of his own that his manager has asked for. You want to see how you can kind of step in and help with that. And it also helps you get an understanding of like what like your manager, like the target hiring manager wants, right? If she's like, oh, like a lot of our goals is to expand new accounts and we're trying to, go to these new territories, you immediately get a sense of, okay, they're in growth mode, they're trying to expand. And what does that mean for me? Is it a good match for my lifestyle? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? There's a lot of ways you can parse out some of the answers, but you want to try and make sure that you have a good sense of that. You can also ask how often someone in a similar role to the one you're applying for has been promoted to more senior internal positions. You can ask about how often people are asked to step outside of their normal job responsibilities. What does that look like? Like how chaotic is it, right, in the work environment? There's a lot of different ways you can kind of get some of this information. And yeah, like the last one I want to talk about too is, can you walk me through the roadmap and projections for the next 12 months? So again, it's a great way for you to tell like what do they have in store, like what is this company like, and how do their employees fit into that overall picture and long-term goal. Cool. And then next, I'll talk about generative AI and ChatGPT and how you can use that to supercharge your job search and kind of help address all of the things that we talked about, improving your resume, improving your interview prep, improving your LinkedIn profile, and then finally helping you with the actual job search itself. So Gen AI, right, it refers to deep learning models that can generate high quality text, images, etc. ChatGPT, as an example, that's the one I'll use in a quick demonstration in a little bit too, is a AI chatbot that uses natural language processing to create human-like conversational dialogue. Chances are most of you have heard of it or played around with it. But essentially, using ChatGPT, you can answer questions, you can write copy, draft emails, hold a conversation, and even explain code in different programming languages, right? There's a lot of potential here. And I think you may have heard about it in various contexts, but a very helpful way to use ChatGPT is when you are applying for a new job or seeking a new job, as a way to take off some of that manual work and kind of make it a little bit easier for you to apply for jobs at scale. And I'll kind of walk through that in a second here. So before I go there, I want to talk about AI prompting and what that is. So again, some of you may know this, some of you may not, but just to make sure we're all on the same page about how this works when interacting with AI, is that prompting is how humans can talk to AIs. It's a way to tell like artificial intelligence what we want and how you want it. And it's usually something that you can write a very specific prompt. For example, you might want to generate an image, but you have nothing to show it as an example. So what would you do, right? So think about it if you were trying to hire an artist to make a painting for you today. If you wanted them to paint you something, what would you do? You would describe it in as much detail as possible, right? You could say one thing, which is paint me a picture of a skyline, right? But that could mean so many different things. It could be New York, it could be Chicago, it could be LA. So you'd be very specific. You'd be like, paint me a picture of a city skyline, and the specific city is New York. It's at night. Like I want to be able to see really dark blues. Like I want to see yellow dots for each of the, whatever it may be. But you would get very specific about the actual instructions you're giving an artist in order for them to paint the most accurate picture to what you have in your head, right? So it's the same principle with you working with ChatGPT or any sort of AI. You want to write as specific and as detailed and as clear instructions as possible, and be very specific about the type of input you're going to provide to them and the type of output that you want them to provide to you, what type of tone they should use, how creative the response should be, so on and so forth. So on the very right here, you can see some examples, right? A not good way to use it would be, how do I add up numbers in Excel, right? But if you wanted to get more specific, it's how do I add up a row of dollar amounts in Excel? Here's the file. I want to do this automatically for a whole sheet of rows with all the totals ending up on the right in a column called total. You're not giving it a lot more context, right? Same thing here, summarize the meeting notes. Instead of just saying that, if you had like a transcript, you could say summarize the meeting notes in one paragraph. Then write a markdown list of all the speakers and each of their key points. Finally, list the next steps or action items for any speakers if necessary, right? So it's again that principle that you want to get as detailed and specific about inputs and outputs. And the same principle we can apply for the job search. So let's think about a few ways this can be done. One is you can use AI with your job search to find the top skills of a job, analyze gaps in your resume, and reword your resume to align those skills. So all those things that I mentioned earlier about how important it is to make sure that when you write your resume, you're tailoring it to the specific job that you want to apply for, that you're making sure that keywords are relevant so it's easier for you to convey how you're a good fit for a recruiter. That's something that AI can do pretty well, actually, and it can make that step a lot simpler for you. So one way to do this, right, is you can say, you go to ChatGPT, and I'll go to ChatGPT in a few minutes and kind of show you an example. But it could be something like, take a look at this job description, right? And you can copy that product manager job description that I was talking about as an example, paste it in ChatGPT and say, please list out the top 5 skills you think the hiring manager is looking for most to fill this position, right? And it'll give you the 5 things. Maybe it's like UX, maybe it's software knowledge, right? Let's just go with those 2 for now. Then you would say, in response to that, take a look at my resume. Please indicate how many of those 5 skills are reflected in my resume, and please feel free to look for words that paraphrase those 5 skills. So now you're asking it to do that work for you, which is scanning through all of it and scan through all of the actual job posting, right? And it'll tell you these are the 5 things that it's looking for. Here are the 5 things that are missing or are on your resume. Then you go, now please tell me how I can reword the bullet points in my resume to better highlight those missing skills, right? So then you're making ChatGPT do all that annoying, manual, tedious work for you, which is finding every job position, finding every actual resume, and making sure it's tailored. One of the most annoying things about job hunting in the past is that for each job you're applying for, you kind of need to tailor your resume a certain way. And it can get very time consuming, right? There's a lot of different positions. It's a lot of different resumes to keep a track of. But with AI, it can be a lot easier to manage and less tedious to kind of do some of this work. Another one could be like an elevator pitch to use for recruiters on LinkedIn. You can say something like, take a look at my resume. Again, you paste your resume and look at this job description, copy and paste that. Please craft a compelling elevator pitch about why I'm a perfect fit for this role compared to other candidates. It'll give you an elevator pitch. Now you know exactly what message to send to that recruiter. Like I showed you that example earlier of the message I sent to a recruiter. You're now making AI write that message for you, so you don't have to even think about how to position yourself, how to make yourself seem like a good fit, how to sell yourself. You'll have ChatGPT do that for you. You can also do it for finding interview questions. You can say something like, assume you're my hiring manager, and again, paste the job description. Please generate a list of role-specific interview questions that you'd ask me in an interview for the job. And now AI is going to even suggest to you things that a hiring manager is likely to ask. So it's a better way for you to practice. Lastly, you can kind of follow up to previous prompts for answers. You can say things like, great, now that I have all of these different role-specific interview questions, please generate highly persuasive answers using the STAR framework. And you can explain what the STAR framework is and customize them to my background and skills. So you're really letting it do all the heavy work for you for all of the principles I talked about throughout the session. So I'll very quickly switch over there and show you how it works in real time. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to pull up ChatGPT over here. Let me go back. And let me just copy this word for word, right? So I'll start with this over here. So take a look at this job description. Please list out the top 5 skills you think that it's going to use, right? So I'm going to go back here. And then before I hit enter, I'm going to go to the actual job description, which is up here. I think it was, oops, give me 1 sec. I'll just find the actual job. All right, I know this is a different one than what I talked about earlier, but let me just use this one. Give me 1 second. Oh, actually, it doesn't have that much detail on this. I'm just going to move on really quickly to a different one. Okay, let me go back here. So So I go up, I'll click this. And I'm just going to copy and paste this. Like struggling to copy and paste for some reason, but once I get this here, let me go back. So I have the prompt, which is take a look at this job description. I'm about to paste it. Please list out the top 5 skills you think it would use, right? So let me go ahead and do that. And then immediately based on that, it's telling me here are the top 5 skills that I think it has, right? E-commerce experience, communication presentation, analytical thinking, so on and so forth. So you immediately know what the position is. It summarized the position for you, and I told you what the top 5 things are. So next, I would go ahead back to this, and I would say, take a look at my resume. Now, please indicate how many of those 5 skills are reflected in my resume, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then put my resume very quickly. Oh, this is actually an image, but overall, I think you get the idea. You essentially are letting the AI do the heavy lifting for you, and you can kind of go from there and what you'd like. Let me go back here real quick. I'm just going to go to my profile and just pick one thing very quickly. My internet is very slow today, so everything is just taking a little longer. Right, so if I just like copy and paste these as my skills, I paste this here. It mentions that there are several things that it has proficiency in and explains how it relates. For example, your resume does not have e-commerce. Although not explicitly mentioned, your involvement in design sessions suggests that you possess strong communication presentation, so on and so forth. So it's just a way for you to kind of supercharge the way that you work. But yeah, with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'll pause there and then maybe we can go through questions. Okay, let me see. I'm going to go through the top. So I see one, which is, what is your opinion of using bold text to highlight specific accomplishments on a resume? Does it help focus attention or detract from the overall look? I think this one can kind of depend. I would generally lean towards not using a bold because it's going to go through an applicant tracking software that usually scrambles the text and makes it plain text either way. So just to avoid any potential mess ups over there, I would just keep it as simple as possible without any bolding. But it's not a huge deal breaker either way. But yeah, good question. Cool. Next, I see one, which is, do you have any tips on tailoring the resume to increase the chances of it being selected by automatic resume screening software? Yeah, I would say the main way to do that is by making sure that you are tailoring each one to the specific keywords of the job. So it kind of goes back to going through the job, finding the specific keywords, making sure your resume has those keywords interspersed in there. And then that way the applicant tracking software can then make sure that you're a good fit for their role. And again, using AI is like an easy way to do it a little bit faster. Cool. So next, does your LinkedIn job skills and summary duplicate your resume? How is it different? Yes, good question. I think this kind of depends on how you want to approach it. Some people like to just reinforce the resume, include the exact same thing as what's on your resume. But if you take a step back for a second, what you're supposed to be doing is tailoring your resume for each job, right? So your resume could be slightly different wording depending on which job you're applying for. Again, not to embellish or say that you did anything that you didn't do, because you're going to get caught. Hiring managers will definitely ask you about it. That's not something you should be doing. But if you're reframing the way your experience fits for a specific position each time, it can become your personal choice about whether you want to have one like master resume that you want to put there that's very general, or you can kind of just add more of a narrative. So it doesn't match exactly the bullet points of your resume, but you can kind of say like, I helped launch 3 products. I worked with 4 design teams. I helped 5 salespeople, and keep it at that. And then if you're applying for a more design-focused role, your resume can dive deeper into the design aspects of it. If you're going for a more sales like led role, right, whatever it may be, you can deep dive there. So I like to keep it a little bit more general, so that way you can deep dive in the actual resume. Cool. I see another question. With the skills area created, you don't have to write up your profile to be a duplicate of your resume. Yeah, kind of the same principle. It lets you be a little bit more, gives you some more freedom to add some more narrative in there that may not be in your resume. Cool. So next, is there a way to test what recruiters use to find candidates on LinkedIn in order to see how friendly a profile is to the roles they're looking to fill? Unfortunately, there's no way for you to do that using LinkedIn itself, but I think some of the tips mentioned where if you were to search for the keywords in the job, keywords in your profile, that's a good way for you to dive a little deeper on what a recruiter is looking for. Because 90% of the time when a recruiter is trying to fill a position, they're looking for who has skills on their profile, right on the LinkedIn skills feature, or who has skills and keywords on their profile that match the job I'm trying to fill. So that's a good way for you to get a pressure test of how close it is to that. Cool. Next, I see, what advice do you have for cover letters? That's a good question. I think it kind of depends. Cover letters, I've heard, aren't as important as compared to a resume, but if a job requires you to add a cover letter, I would still kind of do the same process of going through ChatGPT and saying something like, please write me a cover letter. Here's the job description. Here's my resume. I'd like you to craft a narrative that talks about how I'm a good fit for that role. So that way you still check that box. Although it's not the most important thing when they interview you or they look over your profile, it still makes sure that, yeah, you're checking that box. You're ensuring that you have a good, strong cover letter, and it's not taking too much effort from you. Ideally, you don't want to spend too much time on that. It would be better for you to focus on your interview practice, your actual resume, but you can use ChatGPT to make it a little easier if that's helpful. I think that's all the questions in the chat, but I don't know, do we have time for any more live, or I'll pass it over to you, Deepa, or anyone else?
Yeah, we can take a few more questions if you have. Anyone has any more questions? I don't think so. Thank you, Varun. Now, Pavana will address the vote of thanks.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pavana Bhatt. I'm the board member of NeoVet. And on behalf of NeoVet, thank you, Varun, for this very informative session and also patiently answering all the questions. It's sometimes very difficult to make a presentation like this when the audience is, not live or you don't have faces. Thank you for patiently going through your presentation. It was very clear, very concise, and also very helpful with all the examples that you had. I think it's time for me also to brush up my resume and LinkedIn profile, which I haven't touched for a while now. So thanks for all the tips. And as from NeoVet, we would also like to thank all the participants for attending and also for being an engaged audience by asking questions. Our next event is on personal branding, and that's scheduled for April. And we have some experts scheduled for that session. So please do not miss that opportunity. Hope you all can join us for our next session. And again, I hope you had a good time. And thanks again for joining all the way from Chicago, Varun. And hope you have a good night. And thanks everybody again for joining us today.
Thanks,
Cool.
Varun, and thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.